Welcome to Beyond Your Job, the podcast where we talk about work, life, balance, and everything in between. I'm your host, Iris Clapper, a former attorney and writer with a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology. I'm also a certified professional coach and consultant. So while that's a mouthful, the takeaway is that I'm fascinated by the psychology of work and its impact on how we live. This podcast was born from something I kept seeing in my clients, in my friends, and definitely in myself. You can be thriving in your career, but if you're burning out, it doesn't just stay at work. It permeates home life, marriage, relationships, and of course your emotional and physical well-being. During each episode, I sit down with professionals from diverse industries to gain insight, inspiration, and a few laughs while having honest, thoughtful conversations where everything is fair game as long as they're up for it. I am so excited to welcome Jim Sender. Jim studied business administration at the University of Cincinnati before beginning his career in retail through a management training program at Elder Beerman. It was there that he discovered his passion for the industry and quickly advanced through a series of promotions. His journey to Levi's came about in an unexpected way. After purchasing a pair of Levi's, Jim struck up a friendship with the brand's representative at the store, which ultimately led to his role with Levi's in New York City. Over an impressive 38-year career, Jim held key sales and marketing leadership roles, working closely with major accounts such as Macy's and JCPenney. Among his most memorable achievements were leading the integration of May Company into Macy's and his role in the negotiations to co-sponsor the Macy's 4th of July fireworks show. Now retired, Jim enjoys spending time with his grandchildren and is eagerly anticipating the arrival of his third grandchild this July. And I'll add that Jim is known for a sense of style and love for dressing family and friends. What I think truly sets Jim apart is his ability to tailor his fashion choices to each individual, enhancing their personal style rather than imposing his own. He has a remarkable eye for detail and an instinctive understanding of what works best for each person. And I have been the lucky recipient of Jim's advice. Welcome, Jim. It is so good to have you here with me today.
Reese, it's awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It is such a pleasure. And the first and most obvious question is, take us back to that first pair of Levi's all those years ago. How does that
Well,
become a career?
yeah, who would have known? When I was working on the sales floor as a management trainee, we used to have promotions where you would take the jeans out of the back wall and put them on tables back then. And then you'd have to load them back in the back wall. And I thought to myself, if I never have to touch another pair of Levi's again as long as I live, and then I ended up buying Levi's in the buying office for the department store. And that's where I started my love for the brand. And the Levi guys were great, and they offered me a job in New York City as a trainee. And so I moved from Dayton, Ohio, took a risk, and has really been for me, a storybook career. It's been a fabulous company. It's allowed me to participate in things, see things, work with some of the best and brightest in our industry. Um, yeah, very, very lucky guy.
So I guess it was a risk jumping from Dayton to New York City, but what year was that?
1987.
Wow.
Yeah, 1987. New York was a little different then.
So, right. So that also had to be a change from the Midwest. Was that an adjustment for you?
It was a big adjustment, right? Public transportation. Um, as you know, when you live, like we lived in Riverdale, which is the Bronx, and so where I grew up, you always had a parking place. You never thought you wouldn't have a parking place when you had a car,
Right.
right? Suddenly, you got to go find a parking place at your apartment. And by the way, on Mondays and Wednesdays, trash removal on this day and snow removal on this day. And so once you get a couple tickets, you kind of figure out the lay of the land and buying a ticket for the train into Grand Central and figuring out the Times Square shuttle. Um, it was a very exciting time in my life. I'm glad I took the risk.
Was that your first time in the city?
Um, it was well. I had been there on two buying trips prior, and went when I went in for my interview. So it was very limited. Um, but my family started when they came over. Came from we're in New York City, and so and I did have some my mother's family there, which was helpful. So they helped guide us. But it's just an exciting place to be, and I, at least in clothing, I felt like this is the heart of it all. So I mean, if it was just everybody's there. All the big brands are there. Um, and if I was going to make it through that, transition as far as, Midwest, I never forget, Reese, I was working and the woman I reported to said to me, the regional manager said, "Is Jim doing a good job?" And she said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Because when I see him in the hallway, he walks a little slow." And she said, "He's not from New York. Give the guy a break. He's from Ohio." Not everybody has the same pace as a New Yorker. So, there you go.
That just about sums it up. Walk faster, get out of the way.
Yeah.
It's just a completely different culture. Right. Did you think that you would be there for your entire career?
I honestly, I hoped so.
Wow.
Back, 38 years ago, I looked at the Levi's guys, and there were so many folks with very long tenure. And coming from retail, I knew that it was a big brand that had a dominant position, and it looked, from what I could tell, that Levi's paid well enough that I could do what I wanted to do with my family. And so I thought, if I could accomplish that, and they had a pension, and there were a lot of things that came along with it. Um, you know, that was a long time ago. As you know, today's changed. People don't even offer pensions
Yes.
anymore, right? Because no one has that notion to stay that long. So the incentives have changed. But absolutely, I thought, man, if I don't screw this up, maybe I've lived through countless layoffs, probably over 15 in my career. And every time it makes you think about how precious your job is and who you get to represent in the marketplace. So every time that I survive one, it just honestly energized me more. While I was sad for the folks that lost their job, I saw a lot of very good people go. Um, it energized me that they still chose me to represent them, and so I always took that very seriously.
Is there something about the culture at Levi's then and perhaps now, because you're recently retired, that both attracted you to wanting to have longevity in a career there, which is so unusual today, and that kept you there and that you still think about now?
As you know, um, the culture is the management. You,
Hmm.
right? You talk about culture, but culture can change with management. But I think from from when I started to when I left, there were certain values that the company maintained that every CEO and C-suite said this was the legacy of Levi Strauss and Company, and we're going to maintain that. And they actually aligned with my own personal values, and so it was easy to want to stay. And sometimes, we were in the press, like a lot of big companies, for things that different folks didn't necessarily believe in, right? And that never shook me. We all have different points of view, and we just keep going. So the brand has survived, and I mean, even today, I mean, we are the center of culture, which is pretty amazing for a brand that's over 150 years old. So I don't want to turn this into a Levi's commercial,
No, but
but
it's amazing because and I'm going to ask you to give me an example of one of those things that Levi stood up for and that may have been controversial at the time, but that aligned with your values because that really speaks to culture. So that really interests me.
so one of the things I wasn't before my time I would share with you is that Levi's broke the color barrier in the South in the cut and sew facilities. So that is a big part of our history. Um, what I
Inclusivity.
would Yes, and then what I witnessed, for example, was we were a very big supporter of the Boy Scouts,
Mhm.
and then the Boy Scouts decided that they were against the gay population and took a stand that way. Well, that did not align with our values as a company. And so we stopped funding the Boy Scouts. Well, that was in the press. There were a lot of, I would say, Levi's loyalists that shared that opinion about that they shouldn't be in the Boy Scouts and wanted to drop. I personally fielded calls at my desk. If people found out I worked for Levi's, wanted to share uh, their opinion, and that's okay. You know, fast forward today, guess what? The Boy Scouts accept everyone.
Right.
So, right,
Right.
that was a moment in time, but that would be an example of where we maintained our values. We talk about profits through principles, which circles back to our values. And so I guess that would be my current example that I was actually there to see.
And you know that that makes my heart sing, and especially through the volatile times that I think we're living through right now, regardless of what your politics are, there's a concept that I keep thinking about, which is making decisions and taking a stance and coming out on the right side of history, which is maybe not something that happens in the moment, although my values are very clear for me and the things that I stand up for are very clear to me. And maybe this is sort of self absorbed, but I always hope that at some point down the line, people are just going to come out on the side of inclusivity and why diversity is so important and true equity, which means everybody, not just this group or that group, true DEI and not just tolerance. Tolerance is the lowest common denominator. I think about true empathy, true acceptance, truly being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And we can't understand somebody else's experience, but we can certainly sit with their experience and try to listen and do the right thing. So when I hear this, it just makes my heart sing.
Well, thank you. And I actually was a DEI hire. How about that one?
That's
Um,
okay.
okay, right? You weren't expecting that.
I was not expecting that.
So when in 1984, when I joined Elder Bierman, their management training program was full of women. They were having a really hard time finding men that wanted to enter a retail career. So they targeted men over women to try to add the diversity. And that actually helped me get my foot in the door into the training program. So, there you go. And then there were times in my career where we were a good old boys network in Levi's, and Levi's said, we need more women, right? We need more diversity. And there were jobs that had targets on them that I didn't get. But you stay after it, you keep your head down, you do what you do, right? Hopefully well, and things work out. They still want people regardless of DEI. Companies need people that drive the business or excel in whatever their role is. And so you just got to be patient, and so that's what I was, and it worked out for me.
And at the end of the day, we know that diversity is hugely beneficial, other than it being the right thing to do and a benevolent way to drive your organization. It's also good to have diverse points of view and opinions and experiences. It creates a completely different culture and at the end a completely different product. So I always say if you don't care about it for the right reasons, then maybe care about it for the bottom line, because regardless, it's just a good idea. So with 38 years behind you, how does a leadership style develop? Because you essentially were so young. I'm not calling out your age or mine here, but you've been in this career for so long and I don't know if you stepped in a leadership role, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Talk to me a little bit about that and also how it developed.
Um, so when I started with Levi's, I actually had to take a step back. So I went from a buying position at a department store to a sales trainee.
Okay.
But I thought, if I can take a step back to take two steps ahead, then that's what I'll do. If that's what it takes to get foot in the door. And for me, when I look back on my career, I I've got to work with incredible leaders. So I always watch them and I try to take notes and emulate what worked for me. I also was very fortunate. I had incredible mentors. I had really great folks that took an interest in me that helped me. So that helped my leadership style. And, I've also had some leaders that I didn't care for. That's going to happen in a
Sure.
career this long. And that also helps define you because that helps you know what you really do like and do not like in leadership. And then I think that also shapes you. So I think it's really all of my experiences through the different folks that I've respected or have taken an interest in me. Um, that's kind of what shaped me over the years.
Do you feel like you can put into words what makes for a good leader and what makes for a not so great leader?
I think a good leader is transparent. I think a good leader um, understands how to work with each person on their team. I learned a long time ago, folks say, oh, just always go by the golden rule in management, right? Do unto others as you would want it, right? Done unto you. But I found that's a fallacy in leadership because not everybody wants to be treated like you. The key is to bring out the best in other folks. You need to treat them and recognize what motivates them to get the best out of them. So I think leaders that can do that too are exceptional leaders. You know, um, so I guess I would leave it at that. You
That's
have to be in tune with your team.
And what would you define as a bad leader? Because you and I have also spoken offline about how people don't leave a job, they leave a bad leader. So I'm sure there's a more eloquent way of saying that, but the gist of it is it's the boss that you work for. And I can speak to that. One of my most amazing bosses is also one of my greatest mentors who really steered my career in a certain direction, and she's still someone I'm friends with today. So, what happens when that goes wrong?
Yeah. So the the leaders I guess that I have not gelled with, I would say one, no trust.
Hmm.
Trust is everything. Two, wasn't willing to put their stake in the ground making a decision, um, and didn't have a point of view, right? Like, in my opinion, if you are going to be a leader, you have to have a point of view. You can discuss it with your team and maybe you can move on it. But to have a leader that doesn't have a strong point of view or a North Star is, to me, is a weak leader. And weak leaders want recognition. Strong leaders want their team to get the recognition because they know it'll bounce back to them, right? And so to me, a poor leader also wants recognition because they're insecure, right? If you let the glory, if you will, go to the people that work for you, it'll come back. And I think a lot of leaders don't understand that. Um, it's a people business at the end of the day, and people want to feel valued. And if you can't make somebody feel valued and help them, then you're going to be in trouble.
And I think feeling valued, and you mentioned transparency earlier, I think are so important because at the end of the day, you are working on a team. Having a plan and a North Star, as you said, is great, but also seeking the input of others and creating a culture of trust and reciprocity. If people don't feel valued, if they feel that their ideas are never going to be heard or considered, um, you start to question, what am I even doing here? What's the point of
Right.
this other than just collecting a paycheck?
Right. And I used to say, if I would go in my boss and all I wanted was my day in court, just allow me to share my point of view. And if you truly let me share my point of view and you opt a different way, I'm fine with that. But give me that moment,
Yes.
right? And if you don't give me that moment, that's really hard for me to follow someone.
Studies support what you just said. I mean, transparency is a huge one for employees, and also being heard, having an opportunity to at least voice. And what you just said is super interesting because it actually is supported by science. It's not so much about your idea being the one that is chosen. It's more about having the opportunity to share that idea in a space where it will actually be considered. So we know that that's something that keeps people motivated. And it's very hard when you don't have that type of leader. So actually, that makes me think of another question for you. Over a 38-year career span, are there moments where you're not as motivated? I mean, we're all not as motivated in some moments, but how, I guess the question is, how do you stay motivated for such a long period of time in one place?
Um, well, the truth is, right? Um, my check is my motivator, right? I need to do a good job. Anyone needs to do a good job. I needed a check. I have a family, right? And I need to do a good job to earn my check. Because if I don't do a good job, I'm not going to earn my check. And if I don't earn my check, things aren't going to go well. So that was a huge motivator for me. I mean, that's just being real. Um, and the fact that the values never changed. Dude, I like some decisions. No, maybe not, but that's just the way it goes, right? I've seen a lot of different things, but you also have to recognize that if you want to be relevant, you have to move and modify. The world isn't static, right? So if you are static in a move and modify world, you're not going to win. You're not going to move forward. You know, um, one of the things, it's you know, people say be a change agent, those kinds of things, and it sounds so corporate, but it's true. I mean, if you ask me longevity, over the years we've changed a lot, and I leaned into change because fighting it is not gonna, you're never gonna win. So you might as well take the opportunity to lead, understand it the best you can as quickly as you can, so that you can deliver for the company. And so that's one of the things I've always tried to do, and that's motivated me, frankly.
So I am a person who really thrives with change. I mean, Lord knows, with all my different career changes, although I always say there's a huge common thread from day one through today. But I thrive on change. And I start to get very antsy if I think I'm stagnating. And it's not that I'm chasing the next great thing, it's that I need to stay stimulated on a certain level. But change management is a huge topic in industrial and organizational psychology, and it's incredibly difficult for some people. And there are people who will say, I hate change. And I get that. I totally get that. And there are people who say, I thrive on change. And I get that because I can identify with that. So, this sort of leads me into a little bit of a controversial topic, which is younger workers. So, millennials, Gen Zers, they thrive on different things. They're motivated by different things. Their type of change is maybe the lack of fear of changing careers more often, or maybe it's not even a lack of fear, but really part of the culture that every 2 years it's totally cool to send out your resume. And even before that, if there's an opportunity to just make the change and do the next thing. So I'm wondering if, with all the different people that you've worked with in Levi's, if you saw a real difference in sort of boomer mentality in the workplace and then younger generations, and how that plays out, how that really affects the workplace and also the interaction.
Yeah, I would say, and again, things change, right? And for a lot of reasons, I think to myself, the kids, the young folks, let's just say, they grew up in a very different world than we did, just in general,
Yeah.
right? Like, I can remember years ago thinking my girls are growing up in a world where the number one rapper is white in Eminem and the number one golfer is black in Tiger Woods, right? That's a very different culture in and of itself than, when I grew up, right? It
Yes.
wasn't it wasn't like that. So you just have to know that everything's changing. I think boomer, and I'd like to say I'm at the very tail end of the boomers, just for the record. Um, uh, um, you know, I I feel like I went into Levi's thinking I need to work hard, and in time, once I perfected whatever my job was, that would hopefully allow me to get a promotion. And what's funny, Reese, is I never thought about I want to get promoted in 2 years. I want to get this job is a 2 year job, and I want to get promoted. And I'm going to be a vice president by the time I'm 30. I didn't. I just honestly my thought was I want to make $1,000 for every year I am old, and then I want to make $2,000 for every year I am old, etc. That was more mine, and so, and I don't think I was alone, by the way, back then. The young folks today have a very different, um, I think, point of view on what a career looks like. There are no pensions, so there is no I'm going to join this company and hope I'm here forever. I don't. I think you would say if you ran into a younger person that you would say they're old. They're old school.
Mhm.
You so they come into a company. They're bright people. They're bright young people, and they want success. They want to get paid, and they want to move up. And if they're not moving through the organization, I'm generalizing, of course, but
Sure.
at the pace they think they should, they're going to look for something else. They're going to next and reset, right, and go. And that seems to me what that is. When I would interview young people, I would make it clear, like, you're going to be in a learning curve for a year. Okay, you need to go through two retail seasons to get it. So that's 1 year. Then second year, you're going to have to perform. So you don't get promoted until you've mastered your job. So even if you're a rock star, it's going to be 2 years at a minimum. And if that doesn't work, then maybe this job isn't for you. But that's the way I see it. And some says no problem and is happy to do it. And I was like, what? 2 years in one job? Maybe that isn't the right job for me, right? And then, like, what's my next level if I wait those 2 years? Well, I don't know because I haven't seen how you perform. The natural progression could be X, Y, Z, I would tell you, but it depends, you know, on what's happening in the company, and it depends on your performance, right? Um, so that to me is the number one. My call out is that I feel there is an impatience once they get in an organization on how long they want to stay in any one job, um, till their next promotion, till their next big raise, um, etc. Which sort of worries me because I think to myself, are some young people going into a job for knowing it's a short period of time, and if they're in jobs that they're supposed to have a longer view, right? Then how does that work? How do you trust a long-term view from somebody that doesn't see themselves here 18 months from now? That's why I think it's important that management has longer durations to 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 keep the company on their 5-year plan, 3-year plan, whatever it is, um, because there's churn underneath, um, and that's just the way it is. The way I shouldn't say it's the way it is. I think that's what I've seen, frankly.
And as you're talking, I'm also thinking about the metrics, like our personal metrics that we set for ourselves. I want to be promoted in 2 years. I want to do this 2 years after that and 2 years after that. And then there's the metrics that are set by the company. So I guess where there's the disconnect, the tolerance perhaps for the disconnect is lower. One of the things that I see is, and again, being an executive coach, and I speak to people of all different ages and stages in their career, the concept of work life balance, which didn't even exist when I first graduated from law school. And certainly when you started your career, this was just not even, nobody talked about it. And so you have the tendency to say, oh, well, people aren't working as hard. But on the other hand, that's a good concept. I'm glad that we've evolved towards that because everybody needs to have balance. And that's something that I struggle with personally. I mean, I'm a business owner and I make my own schedule. And in some ways, that's worse. I'm a work in progress as far as work life balance goes. And doing things on the weekend, not doing things on the weekend, carving out those boundaries, that's harder for me. So while I have sometimes criticized that attitude, I also welcome it and I preach it all day long because I think it is important. So I think that that sort of dichotomy, and until we get to where we're all sort of on the same page, there's going to be just that, a disconnect.
Right. I agree with you. And one thing I would like to add is I think corporations a lot of time have a disservice to the young people too, in fairness to them,
Mhm.
because I think a lot of companies talk about succession planning, but they're not good at it. And they don't, or maybe conditions change. Like I said, you move and you modify, and they didn't get to where they were supposed to be based on their succession plan. I don't know how many companies truly do a great job of succession planning.
It's interesting you say that because I recently spoke to someone. There was some succession planning going on in their company, and the succession plan basically consisted of writing in the name of the person who would take your job if you were to quit or be fired or step away or whatever the situation is. That's not succession planning. Succession planning is investing in that person and building that deep bench, starting to give some assignments, teaching them that role, because the whole idea of succession planning is you are going to step off at some time for one reason or another. And the bench is not supposed to be just where that person's name is, it's supposed to be the training that goes into it and the investment in that person. And I think that's what you're getting at. That piece so often does not exist.
And that's where you have to own your career, right? Like one of the things that I think has served me well is I always look for ways to add value outside of my job description. So even if, for example, let's say I'm not making my sales plan for whatever reason, I know I'm not going to make my sales plan. Well, that's not good, right? We all want to hit our numbers. Fortunately, that happened to me much, but when it did, my mind would immediately go to what other things can I do to add value to the company? And by the way, keep my name forward. So they're not just talking about, oh, Jim's missing his plan because I have a top account, but wow, can you see how he's gotten engaged on this and he's working on this ad hoc committee and he's brought this to the table. He's partnering with merchandising on this, etc. So I think you have to figure out your succession plan too, um, and don't live within that. I think you constantly have to look at ways to add value um, outside of your job description too.
I agree. And I also think that that's where we stay motivated because when you're going outside of your job description, presumably you're going to projects or places or committees that you're inherently interested in. So if you're inherently interested in that, you're going to do it for the sake of doing it, and then you're motivated and you're bringing value, and then it's a win-win for everyone. And I also think that if you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about having great mentors, that is so important. And I think we talk about it a lot, but it's overlooked a lot in organizations. Um, your boss is not necessarily your mentor. That's not just not how it works. And it is such an important component of not just career building, but character building, identity roles, identifying our own values, what we want to be, who we want to be, where we can add value, what fuels us. And that is what a good mentor does.
Yeah, I would say that it's been instrumental in my career. The mentors I've had for sure, for sure. And the tough part is you just can't go. I want you to be my mentor.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way.
No, it needs to click. I mean, I think a lot of it is organic also. So I've thought about mentorship programs that are put together in different organizations, and I've seen it done a variety of different ways. But at the end of the day, when you get partnered with someone and it doesn't click for you or them, there's no trust, which is something you spoke about a few minutes ago, which is so important, and no one's really invested. So you can call it that, but it's just form over substance at that
Right.
point.
Agreed. Totally agree.
What advice would you give someone who is entering the workforce, loves the company that they're working for, and is looking for longevity in their career?
So when I was leaving, I actually had a lot of young people ask me, um, what advice would I give them? And I'll tell you the things that come to my mind. First is the right thing to do is always the right thing to do. So,
That.
right, like whether it's going to be popular internal or not, external or not, if you live by what's right, it'll work out. I do believe that. I already mentioned you have to lean into change. Fighting it isn't going to get you um, anywhere. You'll be on the wrong side of the conversation. Um, and for lack of a better way to say it, you got to do the work. There are no shortcuts, right? You got to do the work. Um, and that could look a lot of different ways, but if it means staying a little later, if it means engaging with somebody you might not want to, whatever that looks like, you got to do the work to get the result that you want. Um, be nice. Like, just be nice. I used to tell my team, the work is hard enough. The work is hard enough. We have to be nice to one another. It doesn't mean that we have to see eye to eye all the time or we can't have a different point of view, but be nice. And frankly, when people were very kind when I was leaving, and one of the things that meant the most to me is when people would tell me what they remember about me is that I was nice, that I was respectful, I was kind, and that actually meant the world to me. So
I
that's
can
a
see why that's so important.
the other thing that kind of goes along with that, Reese, like in sales, like what I did, right? You could get in some pretty tough about gross profit, the margin conversation, different things. And never forget that everyone has objectives to hit, right? Your buyer, your customer, they have objectives too. And hate the game, not the people,
Yes.
right? And so don't take it personal, and just know they're trying to survive like you are, and try to find a way through it. So, um, I think a big one's understanding political capital, your own political capital, your customers' political capital, and you know, if you want to increase your, let's say you're in a big meeting and you think you're going to pump your political capital up internally at the expense possibly of your customer's political capital on their end, that's a lose, even internally. So I think, and that takes time, but I don't think there's enough attention taken to what political capital is, how it can be used, when you spend it, when do you keep it,
Mhm.
etc. And like I said, I think you try to find ways to add value outside of your day to day. That would be
I
my advice.
think excellent advice. I know people out there will appreciate that. I could talk to you forever. This is
And I
so,
can to you too.
so fascinating. But before I let you go, I am hoping that you'll do a quick lightning round of 10 questions with me. You don't have to think too much. Give
Let's
me your
do it.
gut. You up for
Okay.
it? Okay,
Sure.
here we go. Number one, introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
What do you do for fun?
Play sports and listen to CNBC.
What is the last show you binge watched?
The Sopranos.
What song, one of my favorite shows, by the way, what song instantly puts you in a good mood?
Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice.
Oh, I love that. What secret power would you choose if you could?
What secret power would I choose if I could? Um, to help make peace in the world.
Jim, I love that. Why am I not at all surprised you said that? Amen.
Yeah.
Who would play you in a movie about your life?
Wow, that's such a hard question, Arisa. I got to think about that.
Okay, we'll
Um,
come back to it. We can come back to
wow,
it.
that's such a great question.
That is a hard one. That's a hard one. I was thinking of very young Robert De Niro, by the way.
Oh, I'll take that. I'll say yes
Very
to that.
young. Yes. You like how I put that in?
Yes, thank you.
Do you prefer a short text or a long conversation?
Um, I would. I, I have to qualify that. I like a short text business wise,
Mhm.
and I like a long text.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Um, folks not being on time,
Interesting. And what's the number one thing on your bucket list?
making sure I spend every minute I can with my family.
Perfection. That is perfection. Jim, what a pleasure having you here with me today. I am
Oh, this
sure
was
that we
so
will
much
do this
fun. Thank
again.
you.
Thank you so
It was
much.
fabulous. All right. Thank you, Arise.
And that's a wrap. If you like this episode, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and share the love. You can always reach out to me through my website, ariseclappercoachingandconsulting.com.